Today we have featured an interview with our very own President Hawkinson by Christine Nardone Storch, a graduate student leading our first Gen Proud celebration happening in front of the library on November 9th. In this inspiring interview, Dr. Hawkinson speaks about his journey as a first-generation college student and the pathway to persistence.
I know that you are a first-generation college student, and so what I'm trying to see and get at is, sort of how that began and how that ended and all the stuff in between.
Well, I grew up in the Chicago area, but I actually was born in San Pedro, California. That's in Los Angeles County. My father was in the military and only lived there for 6 months and then moved to the Chicago region. And because he was in the military, we changed towns about every year or two. So Palatine, Hoffman Estates, and various other towns around Chicago, and then settled in a town called Carpentersville, about 35 miles northwest of the city on the Fox River, and moved there when I was 6 and stayed until, I grew up there basically all the way through high school and the years after. I loved school. I always liked school. I was very active in school. My mother only made it through 9th grade, and she grew up near Wrigley Field in Chicago, and she had to support her mother and grandmother, and so she was already working full-time when she was 14 or 15 years old. And my father finished high school, but he had moved from Minnesota to Chicago, and he became an apprentice electrician. And that's when he met my mother, but it was during the Korean War period, and he went into the military at that time. And basically, my whole childhood was spent with him being in the military. And I had an older brother and an older sister, and then a younger brother and younger sister. So I was a middle child, had to entertain myself. If anyone is a middle child, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So I was very active in school, especially as I got into middle school and high school. Played sports all through high school, 4 years football and 4 years of track, and student government president, class president, just many, many activities. And I loved being at school. And now my older brother and older sister, they both quit high school and they both joined the Army, my brother going to Vietnam. And so I didn't really have the example of someone going to college in my entire extended family, but I was very inspired by my teachers. My teachers were my mentors, the people I looked up to. And so I very badly wanted to go to college. Now, when it came time to go, my parents at that time were just moving to Minnesota, and I was actually on my own shortly before I finished high school in my own apartment, 100% supporting myself. And I was working at a tool and die factory and delivering pizzas, working 70-hour weeks, trying to survive and earn a little money. I had wanted to go to a 4-year school, but I just didn't have the resources, so I went to a community college and continued to work. And so I worked full-time at the factory and then went to school at night. And it was a real struggle. And like many first-generation students who did not have that example in my home of college-educated parents, I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. I was a very good student, but I was still always questioning whether or not I could make it. And that made me work twice as hard, because I not only had to prove to other people that I had what it took to go to college, but I had to prove it to myself. And so I worked very, very hard and struggled from month to month, not knowing if I'd make rent, have enough money, just to eat. I remember I had a budget of about 35 cents a day. I'd buy a salad at lunch and a 10-cent roll. And then at dinner, when I came home from work, I just had a one-room studio in a kind of broken-down house where the heat largely didn't work. But I'd come home, at the beginning of the week, I'd take a can of tomato sauce and put it in a pan with some spices and have spaghetti, and then I'd fill the pan with water and have it the next day, and the next day I'd eat it every day. And by Friday, it was mainly water that I was pouring over my spaghetti pasta. And so I'd eat that, and then I would go to school at Elgin Community College, about 7 miles away. And the car would always break down. I'd have to hitchhike on many occasions. But in any case, I'd get home from school, I'd study, and then my day would start at 6 the next morning. I have to be at work at 7 a.m. And so it was just a day-by-day struggle to keep things going. But I was I was so excited to be on my own and be able to make it on my own, and managed to do pretty well in the community college and earn my degree.
I want to sort of step back for a second, because what I'm hearing is an incredible will to push forward and persist in every aspect of your being. So, you said that you moved around a lot, which is incredibly hard on young people, especially, that is military life, and that is what you sign up for, being in a military family. But what I want to know is, you said you didn't have the example of people in your family. So where did that resolve come from? Was there a teacher? Was there somebody who looked at you? Do you remember a moment where you thought, I want something more? Mm-hmm. And what was that? When did that happen for you?
Yes, I was very much a seeker. In middle school and high school, I read poetry. I would read great novels, and usually quest novels where someone is trying to find out the meaning of life. I used to spend study hall listening to Broadway shows and on records, and I was very inspired to find out who I was and what the meaning of everything was. And I did have a very strong desire to prove myself and to make it, to seek something higher than myself. I probably got it from the novels that I read and the poetry I read, and most certainly from my teachers. My father also had very strong values, and I probably, through osmosis, kind of, those were pulled into me, but I was very much on my own during those years. And I think a lot of the strength came from the fact that I didn't believe I had anything to fall back on. In these years, I really didn't have a home to go to, and so in my mind, it was always, you either succeed or you don't survive at all. And so for me, there was only one path forward, or I would just completely fail. And so I was just driven to keep pushing ahead, because I didn't want to fail and not succeed in being able to both go to college and to be able to take care of myself.
What do you say to the student that feels like that?
I had those moments of where I probably curled up into a ball and had some very difficult times, but I was very fortunate in that the teachers that I had become close to in high school became very close friends after high school, and a few of them really sustained me through these years. I was also in some theater groups, and theater groups are they bond very closely, and so I had a very strong network of people that I could count on to go to when things got really difficult. But I would say more than anything else, it was these teachers who really gave me the strength to make it through those very, very difficult times. And, many young people, I think, do have the opportunity to pivot, and I think not everyone has to take the same path I did, and I was driven in one direction. People can pivot. There's more opportunity today to pivot than perhaps when I was starting off as a 17-year-old on my own for the first time. And one of the things I think I've learned is it's okay to fail. Back then I didn't think it was. And I really had to make myself vulnerable a number of times where I had to allow people to help me, and that was very, very difficult. Especially when I got into my four-year school, because I finished my community college and I was able to take an RLTC scholarship to go to a four-year school. So I went to Western Illinois University. But it happened that I didn't often have places to go during breaks or during the summer. I usually had some military responsibilities, but I also had weeks or even months where I had no place to go. So that's how I could really relate somewhat to our prof students or students who don't have a family home to go to.
It seems that from what you're saying right now, you were set up in a life that didn't have it mapped out that this would all happen for you. You keep naming teachers. Who's the one?
Well, there was one teacher who very close to in high school, and after I graduated, he and I would hang out together. And he was probably about 10, 12 years older than I was, but he was a very popular person in the community, very hardworking, very strong personality. And even when I went away to college, I would come back and often stay with him. And then I met his wife and became very close friends, and watched his children come into the world and grow up. And I was sort of like the little brother. And this guy was kind of a bigger than life person. And so for years we stayed in close contact. And the real tragic thing is that I received a call from his wife about 20 years into our adult friendship, and he had taken his own life. And it was an absolutely horrible, horrible thing. And like so many of us who lose someone to suicide, first we don't believe it because this was someone who would never take his own life, and second, I felt this guilt because if I had been there, I had actually written him about a week before it happened, and the letter was still sitting on the counter in their house. I always thought if he only opened it, maybe he would have read it and given me a call or something. But that too, it's there's a poem that talks about little deaths. Be aware of the little deaths, and it's those little things of great sadness that can often bring you down. And at the same time, these are the things that are a part of life, and that we have to be able to work through them.
Although he lost his life to suicide, it sounds to me like he gave you part of yours.
Oh, that's very true. When I think of myself in those years, I just think how vulnerable I was and very insecure about who I was. Even though on the outside, I was someone who was, again, very strong, and again, I was always a very good student. But I never knew if I would even make it, and so when I think of this man and some of the other teachers and the gifts they gave me, I was just a young guy. There's no reason why they would really have to hang around with me, but they just had so much love in their hearts for young people. And whenever I see a young person who's suffering or struggling, I actually see myself in that young person. And in some ways, if I can help that person, I'm kind of helping the younger me. I'm kind of helping myself when I was that age. That's kind of the way I look at it.
So we're gonna pivot a little bit to you graduating from receiving your associate's degree, mm-hmm. and now you start going to college. You decide, okay, now I'm going to do a 4-year. Mm-hmm. What did you decided to major in history? Yes. Tell us about that.
Well, it kind of ties into my love of stories and learning about people who have been successful in their lives, and I love historical novels. I read them constantly. I just love reading the story and how people are able to overcome in their environment, overcome adversity, and overcome impediments within themselves. And so history was a good path for me at that time. But I also had been involved in theater and speech, communication, storytelling, things of that nature. And so I minored in communication, and then I was going through the ROTC program at my university, and I stayed in a residence hall, eventually became a resident assistant, and was just in with a very, very good group of people. And I washed pots and pans in the cafeteria. It was a real struggle. But again, my friends helped see me through it, and I knew I'd be going into the Army after I finished, and so I didn't really worry about it, at least the first few years. I had a 3-year commitment. So I was commissioned a second lieutenant and an infantry officer, but I took a delay because at this point I had decided I wanted to go to grad school and I wanted to be a professor at some point. And so I applied to graduate school at the same university, but now in communication. And I was able to take a delay from active duty, and I served in the local National Guard unit as a field artillery officer. I spent about a year getting my master's degree, and then I went active duty. I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, where the infantry school is, and spent 3 years in Germany, essentially, as a platoon leader, a weapons platoon leader, and then eventually, because of my master's degree in communication, I ended up as a public affairs officer. And when I got out of the military, I knew I wanted to go on for my doctorate, and so I went to Southern Illinois University and essentially spent 4 years there earning my doctorate. And at that point, I was able to follow a lifelong dream, and I went into the Peace Corps. And I'm old enough to remember President Kennedy's charge to all young people to, not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, and in the Peace Corps for the world. And so I went to Mali in West Africa. Most people have heard of Timbuktu, if they haven't heard of Mali. And I spent 2 years there as a Peace Corps volunteer and teaching at a teacher's college, and had an absolutely incredible experience. And then at that point, I had the opportunity to apply to be a professor at the school that I had received my bachelor's and master's degree from, Western Illinois University. I'd even taught there 1 year on my doctorate degree as a temporary instructor. And a lot of people there knew me, and I was able to be hired as an assistant professor, tenure track. And I right away became very involved. And after 2 years, though, I still had this desire to travel. And so I applied to be a Fulbright scholar and was selected to work in the city of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso, which is in West Africa. I was at the University of Ouagadougou, and I taught there, and I did research in African folklore and storytelling. So I spent a year there, and then I returned to my job at Western Illinois University and continued to be very involved in faculty governance, and altogether spent about 10 years as a faculty member, and then I became department chair of a very large department, the communication department, which included broadcasting and speech and hearing. And I spent 10 years as a department chair, and then 3 years as an associate dean in the College of Fine Arts and Communication, then 4 years as the associate provost of the university, and then 4 years as the provost and academic vice president. I had not planned on going into administration. I thought maybe at some point at the end of my career I might be a department chair, but that's as far as any ambition went. I love teaching, and again, thinking of all the gifts I was given by my teachers, I just wanted to teach and pass it on. But these positions just sort of opened up for me along the way, even though they were national searches, but they just sort of kept opening up. And we're 4 years into my role as a provost, or in my fourth year, and because I'd been at the same school for 27 years at that point, and I'd never really tested the waters of applying for positions elsewhere, my wife and I thought it might be interesting just to apply for a presidency to see if I can even get a first interview. And I didn't think I would get any opportunities, but it turned out that most of the places I applied to, I got an interview, and it was very rewarding. And one of those places was Kutztown University, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. So I see that you did, it was a one-man show that you presented, and I believe that you wrote it and you performed it, Abe Lincoln the Man. Mm-hmm. That was your thesis project for your master's, Western Illinois. And so tell me about that. I mean, do you think that people would be surprised to know that you starred and wrote in your own show?
Yes. When I was working on my master's degree, I was involved in performance. And Abraham Lincoln had always been a hero, and he's a hero to countless other people, but I kind of very much was in tune to his background, humble beginnings, self-taught, self-made man, and things just sort of opened up for him as well. He might have been a little more ambitious than me, but I thought it'd be wonderful to do a one-man show on his life, and so I wrote the script. Basically, it opens with me giving his first political speech, and then I sit down at a desk, and I begin to just tell my story and as Lincoln, and at different points I step forward and I give his different speeches. I remember I had to memorize, my script was about an hour and 15 minutes long, and memorizing all that was really a feat. And it ends as he goes to the theater. He just had a dream. Someone had died in the White House, and it was the president. It's a true story that he had a premonition of his own death. And then I say, well, I have to go to the theater now. Mary's waiting, and that's how it ends. And it turned out pretty well. I gave about 25 performances throughout the Western Illinois region in libraries, schools. I have Lincoln's book on leadership sitting in my office in the top drawer of my desk. And when I need inspiration, I often pull that book out and I see his sayings about interacting with others and leading others. And so I think he's been a major inspiration to me as president of the university.
Have you pulled on him or that for inspiration? These last few months have been difficult. They've been difficult. I mean, we would be lying to say that they aren't. They're difficult for anyone in the best of circumstances and in the worst. Have you pulled inspiration from there? Yeah,
I mean, he certainly dealt with a lot of adversity. And I've gone to the Lincoln Museum in Springfield a number of times. And if you go through the White House, you walk through this sort of tunnel and you hear all these voices from the walls yelling at you as if you were Lincoln, calling him all kinds of horrible names, and yet he had the inner strength to know that what he was doing was right, and I'm sure he questioned himself, but he felt that what he was doing was right, and he was able to persevere despite all the nastiness. And I can relate at a much smaller level here. I mean, opening the university in a pandemic, and there are many people who have been not in agreement with that and have been very vocal about that, but I just tried to follow his example and persevere because I felt in my heart that it was the right thing to do. I think that the events I've had in my life embedded a strong sense of duty into me. I mean, both from my childhood. Again, I think a sense of duty is something I would have gotten from my father as well, something I got from the military, something I got from the Peace Corps. In working in the tool and die factory, I worked in an emergency room. It's just this sense that you have to carry through with your promises, and also I often talk about what the purpose of college is. I talk about it as an awakening, to awaken young people, to make them curious so they want to learn new things, to help build their character and instill in them a gratefulness and a humility that will serve them for the rest of their lives. And I like to think that gratefulness and humility that was embedded in me when I was young has served me my whole life. And I was very much aware of the fact that many young people don't do well in remote learning, and that young people are hungry to be together. What made it possible for me to succeed when I was young was being with my friends in college, and I felt that our students had that same need, and I wanted to do all I can to provide that opportunity for them. I also have always felt a gratefulness for the communities I've lived in. I believe very strongly that the university needed to be open to serve the community. A lot of people don't realize, but we pump about $560 million a year into the local economy, and thousands of people derive their jobs indirectly, some directly, many indirectly, from the university being open with a residential on-campus experience. I felt that if I didn't do everything possible to reopen, that I'd be letting down not only our students, but our faculty, our staff. We would have had to furlough many people if we were shut down this year. I just thought of all the kindness that the people in our broader community have shown me and Anne-Marie since we've arrived, and I would have felt awful if I had not reopened the campus, and many of those people may have lost their livelihoods. And so all these things, my past, the things I've learned, my sense of duty, and then my sense of gratefulness for the years that I've been here kind of helped me to persevere through a lot of people not happy with me for having opened, but I still think it was the right thing to do.
Through all of that, what I have seen, a theme in your life, is this gratefulness of the community that surrounds you. So thinking about your decision to open, it's not surprising because people need people. Students that young need to be around people. It's important. And for some, I suspect you, it saved you. It picked you up. It pushed you forward. So you have been very successful. I mean, if there were a case for a first gen student to say, how do I get, I don't think I could ever reach there. Your story is one that is inspiring because you weren't handed a degree. You worked for it. I mean, every aspect of your life, you worked for it. So now that, as a first gen student, they're looking at your life and they look at it and they just, I could see students looking at you and being like, I don't know if I could do that. How could I do that? He just kept going. He was by himself. He paid for this. He worked. I mean, you said you got up at 6 a.m. and you studied. You went to school at night and then you studied all night. When did you sleep? So the question is, if there's a first gen student that's like, I can't do it. I'm looking at this man's resume. How am I ever going to get there? What do you tell them?
One day at a time.
Right.
It's the only way you can do it. Is just one day at a time, and try to make it to the next weekend. And if you push yourself too far out there ahead, you're only going to be disappointed. So it's just step by step, and you get to your destination. Every step I've attained, I've always felt that I didn't necessarily deserve, but I always felt grateful for the opportunity for each step along the way. I think I would have been happy just to be a professor and spend my career teaching. But the thing about being able to move up in your profession to the higher levels of your profession means that it gives you more opportunity to help other people and to give back. And so sometimes I wish I had a simpler life and didn't have to deal with what are often very, very difficult decisions. But at the same time, having to deal with those more complicated decisions allows me to do greater good, is the way I look at it. I think we always question whether or not we deserve the gifts that we've been given. I was 52 years old when I got married. I reached 50 without thinking I would ever marry. I thought I had missed my opportunities along the way. Whenever I'd have a relationship, a year later I'd be gone. I'd be to another country. I'd be in Europe. I'd be in Africa, wherever. And just when I gave up any thought that I would marry, I met Anne Marie. I'm very happy in the way my life has gone, and I'm going to be around for a while yet.